Okay, sweet. So rappelling. I have a few devices and a few different ways of explaining this, but the first thing that we do when we come up to the anchor, it's going to be dependent on the situation. So, for example, last weekend I was rappelling somewhere and it was a very easy station to set up on. So the station itself, it wasn't exposed, it wasn't unsafe, so I didn't need to personal anchor in. But a lot of the times, and if you're descending from a multi-pitch, you will need to personal anchor into the anchor as you're going. So I already have a whole video on personal anchors. There's just normal slings, could be a 60 centimeter, could be a 120. And then there's also fancy devices like the adjust that you can choose. But in this scenario, I'm just going to show for simplicity, setting up a rappel without having to personal anchor, and then we'll talk about how that fits in the future. So the first thing that you want to do is feed the rope through the system. So in this case, this is a pretty common setup for a rappel. It would just be two, what they call rappel rings, which are just fixed loops. And I would put the rope through both of those. And when we're rappelling, it's best practice to tie a knot into both ends of the rope as you're rappelling. I made a video on this as well, but one easy way to do this, you want about 30 centimeters of tail. And then you can make a gun with your hand, put it in the gun, and then you wrap it around once, twice, and then through where the gun is. And that tail, you can see this tail got shorter just because of the rope. So that's actually too short. So I'm going to push even more through and make sure that it's at least 30 centimeters. And that's just because the rope can roll a little bit on the end, and we don't want that. So I'll show you guys one more time. So I have my gun, leave a lot of slack there, and then I wrap it around once, twice, and then back through where that gun is. Boom. And then it should look like an equal side on one side and crossed over on the other. You can wrap around even once more, and it'll look like an equal side on both. There's lots of videos on that. It's called a stopper knot if you want to look it up afterwards. If you don't get it on your first try, don't worry about it. Cool. So I've pulled it through. I've tied my knot in one end, and then generally you want to tie it in both ends. That way you can't rappel off the end, because a lot of people get hurt because of that. Now the next thing, and this is a kind of a trick that not everyone gets taught, is I always put on my friction hitch next. So there's lots of different friction hitches. The one that I use these days is the Sterling. It's called a hollow block. So this is, I think it's 13.5 inches, and it's just a very lightweight, kind of flat, half webbing, half rope, or half sling, half rope. There's lots of different ones. You could also, the cheapest version of this is just to buy a 6 mil Pressic. You can get it, I think it's like same thing, 13 inches, and then you just tie it together. That's what I started with for the first few years. It was just a rope tied together, but it has to be a smaller diameter than the rope you're using it on. So it won't grab as well if it's not smaller than it. And there's a ratio for it. I don't know what the exact ratio is, but that's what I started with. And then I bought this once I started doing a lot more climbing. Now there's lots of different friction hitches. What I do when I'm setting this up, the first thing I do is I take this off, I clip on my locker, then I clip my locker to my belay loop, and then I grab both ropes and I wrap it around. And the amount of times I wrap it around depends on how steep the rock is that I'm descending down. But my standard is about 3. 1, 2, 3. And then I clip in the other strand and lock it. So this is called an auto block. There's a lot of different friction hitches. There's Pressics, There's ones where you feed it through here. This one definitely isn't the most like sticky or firm one. It can loosen itself quite easily. So if you're like crazy, super safety oriented, you can look into all the different types and their uses. But that's what I do usually. Depends. And then the next thing I'm going to do, I'll zoom out a little bit. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Is I'm actually going to pull a bite through the rope. So I'll pull a big amount, not even a bite, just a bunch of slack. So now there's slack between me and the anchor. It doesn't seem as important because I actually don't have that much rope in front of me here. But when you have a heavy rope underneath you, pulling that slack through just allows you to have only a little bit of rope, and it's a lot easier to handle. Now, what I do almost all the time is I will extend my rappel. And the reason for that, I'm going to show you why we want to extend our rappel, is because, don't worry about this part because I'll explain it in a bit. If I don't extend this rappel device out, this friction hitch is meant to be a third hand. So if my hand lets go, then it will stop me. But in an event where it's not extended, you can see how close these are together. I'm just going to pull the rope through here so I can show you under tension. So this is how it's supposed to work. If I have my hands underneath the rappel device, it's going to stop me from lowering. And then as I let it slide through my hands, it goes down. But if the rappel device is too close to the friction hitch, it'll actually deactivate the friction hitch. And then without my hands on, I just keep sliding. So that's why having the friction hitch or third hand too close to the rappel device can be dangerous. So the way to mitigate for that, the way they used to do it, that I was actually taught back in 2015 when I did it by some older climbers, is they would say, oh, just clip it to your leg loop and that will make it far enough away from the rappel device. But if you actually test that in certain scenarios, if you're in the right, if you like, that'll stop it in most scenarios. But if I get twisted around, my leg comes up, it can actually deactivate it, even if it's clipped to my leg loop. So that's not really common practice anymore, but you might, depending what book you read, see it in those books or resources. So if you see that, that is why. And you definitely don't want that to happen, because if you're rappelling and your hand slips off and then your system doesn't back you up, that's not good. So what we want to do is we want the belay device to be a little bit higher up. And you can do that a couple different ways. When I first started, I was using a 60 centimeter sling to do this, once again, just because it was cheap and it's what people taught me. So you can girth hitch. A lot of people girth hitch the sling either around their belay loop, or some people girth hitch it around the two hard points. Two hard points kind of keeps your belay loop a little bit more clean, but I don't mind. So you would clip the sling to that, and then you would do the same thing. And what we're doing when we're putting the rope through the device, this is an ATC, a guide ATC. You can actually use it both ways. But you can see one side has teeth in it and the other side does not have teeth. So the only time that I use it without the teeth is if it's on a really low angle terrain, because it'll have less friction. But usually I have the teeth facing down. And then I'm going to jam a bite of rope. Don't know how well y'all can see, but I'm going to jam a bite of rope, 2 ropes into the device. Boom, 2 ropes into the device. And then I'm going to unclip from the black wire there and clip it through both ropes. It's really important that you visually check that it's clipped through both ropes and the actual black piece. Lock the carabiner, and then I'm going to pull all my ropes through until I'm tensioned. So now I have to move this back because it's so extended. So now I'm under tension. And right now you can see there's a big loop between my friction hitch and my belay device. So this is just testing the belay device, but if I was to let go or let my hand slide through, it would just keep going. What I want to do is test my third hand and make sure that's actually biting. So I'm going to sit back, and then my hand is below my friction hitch. And if I add a little bit of slack to the system, then you'll see I don't move anywhere. And that's just my friction hitch. The friction hitch isn't biting the rope with all my weight on it. It's just acting like my hand and allowing the friction to move through the belay device and actually stop me. So once I'm at this stage, remember, if I was personal anchored in, that personal anchor would be on this whole time. But once I've tested the system, then I'm going to manage the friction hitch and slowly let it slide through both hands. As you're going down, you kind of have to manage the terrain, keep looking below you and making sure that you're not going to trip up or get swung around. Sometimes you can get bumped around. Generally, people recommend to always keep a hand on the rappel strand, even if you're using one hand to put on the wall. Some people say if you're going to go hands off, to either tie a knot in the rope, like a big knot, just a bite on the two ropes. Or the old school method was you would just wrap the rope around your leg a couple times. If I've tested my friction hitch and I'm super confident on it, I don't mind going hands-free to deal with the next anchor, but that is up to you. That's just a best practice thing. It depends where you learn. And then the other thing that I wanted to share is on a multi-pitch scenario, you can imagine if I rappel all the way down, then I get to my next anchor, I need to personal anchor into my next anchor. So this is where having a just 60 centimeter sling can be kind of limiting, because now I need another piece of equipment to anchor into the next anchor. So I'll show you another way to extend your belay that allows for that. Give me a moment. So what I'm going to do here is the exact same system, except I'm going to switch it out for a 120 sling, which is really how I've been doing it for the last many years when I'm descending these multis. And there's lots of ways to do it, so feel free to research around and figure it out for yourself. But I get the 120 sling, and I'll girth hitch it to the belay loop, and then I tie a knot about halfway through. And that knot allows me to clean it up a little bit, to extend my belay, extend my rappel the same way as the 60 centimeter sling. It's like literally the exact same distance. But I also have this loose end here, which I would throw a locking carabiner on. And with the locking carabiner, you can clip it a few different ways. I've usually just clipped it back to my belay loop. Yeah, you can clip it to this carabiner, you can clip it to this carabiner, whatever, just somewhere out of the way, so that when you get to the next anchor, you can clip into it, lock it. I'll actually pretend this anchor is my next anchor. You clip in, lock it, and then what you would do to shift into your personal anchors, you would rappel and put so much rope through the rappel system that you can see this whole rappel system is now loose. So I know with confidence that I can take off the ATC because I'm on my personal anchor. So what you would do is take off your ATC. It's still just hanging here. Take off your friction hitch, because usually there's going to be a second person behind you. If not, then there's someone that is beside you, or you're rappelling by yourself. Who knows? Now you just throw this on my side, and then you'd yell off rappel so that they can come down, or the buddy's beside you. And then you would pull the rope through the next anchor, tie your knot in it, keep pulling it down. Make sure you untie the knot on the other side. You can imagine, and it's happened so many times, people forget to tie the stopper knot, and they pull it up to the anchor, and then it doesn't go through. And now they're stuck on the side of the cliff with a rope all the way up, which sucks. So you'd pull that out, and then you would pull the rope down, set it up all again, and then you already have your ATC here. Really quick, put the friction hitch on. As I said, do the hollow block first, or whatever third hand you choose based on the scenario and your training. 3. Lock this up, pull a bite through, stuff. And because the ATC is already set up, it's a lot easier the next times. And if you can do this efficiently, you'll get down the mountain way quicker. And then I'll lock this, pull all the rope through the ATC first and try and get that pretty well tensioned. And then move it through the friction hitch. And then I move my hips closer to the wall, sit back, test the belay device, move up my friction hitch, test the friction hitch, make sure that the PA is loose so it's actually testing the rappel system. And then finally I will take this off. And just do it again and again and again. Now the last thing I wanted to show you was a third way of extending the belay. I'll keep the friction hitch on just for the sake of show. But this is the new one that I'm experimenting with that I think is pretty, it's actually probably the one I'll go with, but I'll have to test it a lot more over the next couple summers to find out, which is the adjust. Haven't fell in love with it yet, but same thing here. You would girth hitch it around the belay loop. Boom, boom. Now, the weird thing about this one is you can't really tie a knot in it to have a shelf in the middle. So what I would do is I would extend this out fully. Still haven't figured out the trick to extending it quickly. But I would tie a clove hitch, and I actually posted a video about this on my Instagram last week, but I tie a clove hitch in the middle, and then that is where I would be attaching my rappel device. So there's a clove hitch in the middle of this, can even be a little bit closer to the harness, just so I have more space with the adjust. That's what's going through the ATC. Boom. And then this is just my PA. So as I'm rappelling, it's, just in this system. And then when I get to my next anchor, I can clip this in, tighten it up to wherever I need, and then get off my rappel system. So that one looks pretty solid. I think I'm going to be doing that. It also kind of holds your AT3 away from you, so it's not sliding around as much, which is cool. But those are the ways to rappel. That's it. Sweet. Do you have any questions, Martina?
Thanks. Yeah, the only question I have is I was doing it right along with you here. I had a piece of rope and my rappel stuff.
Yeah.
I just have a hard time remembering all the different steps when I haven't felt confident yet to do it all by myself when I'm on top of the wall to rappel down.
Yeah. How much have you practiced?
I've probably altogether done it 10 times, but yeah.
I would practice at home 50 times.
Oh, okay.
Because it only takes 5 minutes to do this.
Yeah.
And if you have a rope and stuff like that, you just need something to hang the rope over, whether it's, at your stairs or even over a door, something like that. If you practice 50 times, it might take you an hour, but you won't, you can just make those because it's a lot harder to practice when you're hanging off the side of a cliff because you're scared as well.
Yeah.
If you practice in a safe environment, you can think things through and then just build your system. I know where all this stuff is on my harness.
Yeah.
And I know the steps. So if you just already have that muscle memory, it's kind of, do you play any instruments?
I play some piano. Yeah.
It would be like someone saying oh, I can't play hot cross buns. You're how many times have you played it? It's 10 times over the past 6 years. It's well, I'm sure if you do it a lot more times, then you're going to be way more confident.
Yeah. It's just, I was wondering, is there some kind of acronym or some kind of way to remember all the different steps? Number 1, when I'm start, what do I do first? Then 2, 3,
Yeah. I'll have to think about a way to build it. I think about it like going direct. So I put on my personal anchor. Then I set up my rappel system and test it because I always test my next system. So you can think about the rappel system as two things, your friction hitch and your rappel device.
Yeah.
Test it and then release your personal anchor. But there's enough steps in there that it's probably, there may be an acronym that I don't know, but I can't make one up on the spot. So
there's so many different little steps. Yeah, that's right.
yeah, well, simplify it, right? You personal anchor in, and sometimes you don't have to, like I said. And then all you have to do is put on your friction hitch, pull the rope through, put on your extended rappel, and then test it. So there's only 2 points of contact with the rope, right? The third hand and the rappel device.
Yeah.
Also, this is one thing that I would highly recommend you like go out with someone who's experienced in it and do before. Like I wouldn't just watch this video and then go rappelling. I would definitely pay for someone to, or just have a friend who knows how to do it to go out with.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Practice it at home. Yeah.
Yeah. Sweet. You got any other questions while we're here?
No.
Amazing. Well, it's been fun. I got the recording, so I'll post that if I didn't mess up recording it. I think I got it this time. So
Good.
amazing. Well, it's nice seeing you again.
Yes. Thank you.
No problem. Ciao, ciao.
See you.